49 dumbest cooking fails in the US. Moments where someone tried to make dinner and instead created a full-on kitchen nightmare. No tutorials, no mercy. Just fast, brutal stories of overconfidence, bad hacks, and decisions that turn a normal meal into a cleanup operation and a lifelong family joke. 1. Weston decided to challenge the laws of thermodynamics with a baked Alaska, a dessert that requires timing, precision, and a brain, none of which he brought to the kitchen. He forgot the critical step of freezing the ice cream until it was harder than a granite countertop. The meringue looked magazine-ready for exactly 4 seconds before the center collapsed into a sad, vanilla swamp. He still hit it with a blowtorch, because if you're going to fail, you might as well light it on fire. He served the slushy mess on soup plates and called it global warming surprise. The guests drank their cake with spoons, pretending that warm charred milk soup was a deliberate culinary statement. 2. Jessica saw a 5-minute hack online claiming that blending boiling tomato soup creates a velvety texture, proving once again that the internet is trying to kill us. She forgot that steam creates pressure and blenders are essentially pressurized cannons waiting for a trigger. She hit pulse, and the lid shot off with enough force to take out a satellite. The kitchen was instantly recoated in scalding marinara, looking less like a cooking accident and more like a scene from a low-budget slasher film. She spent the evening scrubbing red sauce off the ceiling fan blades while eating dry cereal in the dark to hide her shame. 3. Gus bought a whole trout to feel like a rugged outdoorsman but skipped the part where you Google how to prepare fish. He threw the entire thing into the pan, scales and all, assuming they would just melt away like magic. He served it with lemon wedges and unearned confidence, calling it rustic style. The guests politely tried to eat, but it was like chewing on a mouthful of sequined roofing shingles. One friend asked if the crunch was a new trend. Gus just nodded sagely and passed the salt, completely unaware he was forcing his loved ones to digest biological armor plating. 4. Naomi read a forum thread claiming that brining a turkey in pickle juice would make it taste exactly like that famous chicken sandwich chain. She committed fully, soaking the bird until it turned a concerning shade of radioactive green. When it emerged from the oven, it didn't smell like Thanksgiving. It smelled like a hot jar of Vlasic left in the sun. The meat was aggressive, sour, and tasted like a deli sandwich that had given up on life. The family ate in confused silence, feeling less like they were enjoying a holiday meal and more like they were being punished by a giant angry cucumber. 5. Tony lacks the patience gene, so he decided to force open the Instant Pot to check if the beef was tender, ignoring the giant warning label about high pressure. The pot responded with the fury of a geyser, launching a stream of brown gravy and superheated carrots straight into the kitchen curtains. The family dog, traumatized by the explosion, went into hiding for 2 days. Neighbors actually texted to ask if a pipe had burst. Tony tried to play it off as venting the steam, but scrubbing beef stew off the ceiling is a very humbling experience that really kills the appetite. 6. Denise had a Himalayan salt lamp on her counter and assumed that because it had the word salt in the name, it was basically a giant seasoning block. She actually took a cheese grater to the lamp to season her steaks, ignoring the fact that it was a dusty light fixture, not food. The meat ended up tasting like the floor of a crystal shop, with a distinct crunch of drywall and ancient minerals. On the bright side, her family's iron intake probably skyrocketed that night, though her dentist was the only one who actually profited from this geological dinner disaster. 7. Alexis wanted to bring the drama of a high-end steakhouse into her suburban home, so she decided to make bananas Foster with high-proof rum. She poured a generous amount into the pan, completely forgetting that her wooden cabinets were only 12 inches above the stove. The flame didn't just flambe the fruit, it licked the veneer right off the cupboards, turning the kitchen into a momentary inferno. The smoke alarm provided a screeching soundtrack while she frantically blew at the fire like a birthday candle. The dessert was technically caramelized if you enjoyed the distinct flavor of burnt laminate and panic. 8. Blake made a pumpkin pie from scratch and whipped the cream by hand, looking like a total pastry pro. He piped generous, fluffy clouds onto everyone's slice, creating a visual masterpiece. The first bite was a shock to the system because Blake had forgotten the sugar entirely. It turns out that unsweetened heavy cream just tastes like greasy, thick air that coats your tongue in sadness. The table went silent as everyone's brain tried to process the betrayal. He ran back to whisk and powdered sugar, but the damage was done. You can't untaste fatty disappointment. 9. Olivia missed the memo that metal and microwaves are mortal enemies from different dimensions. She wrapped her potatoes in foil, hit start, and effectively created a localized lightning storm in her kitchen. It wasn't cooking. It was a heavy metal concert in a box. The microwave died a hero's death with a loud, expensive pop, while the potatoes remained stone cold and raw. She finished them in the oven an hour later, but the flavor of electrical fire is hard to mask. She spent $200 on a new appliance to save 5 minutes. The math does not check out. 10. Derek tried to keep his air fryer clean by using a loose sheet of parchment paper, forgetting that an air fryer is basically a miniature hurricane. As soon as the fan kicked on, the paper flew up, kissed the heating element, and turned into flaming confetti. The smoke alarm started singing the song of its people, alerting the entire apartment complex to his genius. He served the charred remains as smoky artisan fries, claiming they were low-carb because half the mass had incinerated. His landlord was less than impressed with the scorched countertop and the smell of burnt regret. 11. Connor treated cooking instructions like mere suggestions and threw a solid brick of frozen shrimp directly into a scorching skillet. Instead of searing, the ice melted and created a sad, fishy sauna. The shrimp boiled in their own defrost water until they achieved the texture of a pencil eraser or a stress ball. He added lemon to mask the failure, but you can't marinate a rubber band into submission. The whole house smelled like low tide at a Jersey beach, and dinner was officially downgraded to a sleeve of saltines and some cheddar cheese. 12. Pablo decided that cheese is cheese and attempted a fondue using block feta. He apparently skipped the chapter on melting points and protein structures. Instead of a silky river of gold, the pot turned into a grainy, salty separation of oil and solids that looked like warm cottage cheese. He whisked frantically with wine and cornstarch, but the feta just stared back, unbothered and chunky. Guests dipped their bread into the clumpy sorrow, and Pablo rebranded it as deconstructed warm Greek dip to save face. Friendship survived, but trust in his cooking did not. 13. Tasha spent 12 hours smoking a brisket, only to ruin it in the last 12 seconds. She sliced into it immediately because she wanted it piping hot, ignoring the laws of meat physics. All the moisture sprinted out of the beef and pooled on the cutting board like a crime scene. By the time the meat hit the plates, it was drier than a cardboard box in the Mojave Desert. The cutting board had a delicious, juicy meal. The guests had to chug water just to swallow the meat. She learned the hard way that patience is the most important ingredient. 14. Amir treated rice like oatmeal, using a simple 1-to-1 water ratio because reading the package is for quitters. The pot boiled dry in minutes, and the rice fused to the bottom with the strength of industrial cement. The kitchen filled with the aroma of scorched starch, which is very distinct from toasted. He scraped off the top layer and called it al dente, but everyone knew the truth. His Persian ancestors were definitely rolling in their graves while his guests quietly hid the crunchy, broken grains under their napkins. 15. Bruce decided his cast iron skillet needed a spa day and soaked it overnight in soapy water before scrubbing it with steel wool. He stripped 80 years of seasoning in 10 minutes, revealing a dull, gray, pitted disc that looked like a sewer grate. When he tried to fry an egg, it bonded to the metal on a molecular level. Somewhere, a grandmother felt a disturbance in the force. The pan now rusts if you even look at it wrong, and Bruce is no longer allowed near the family heirlooms. 16. Eliza wanted to join the Dalgona coffee trend, but felt too superior to use instant coffee. She used premium ground beans, assuming quality would win over chemistry. After 20 minutes of whipping, her arm was numb, and she had created a bowl of wet, caffeinated sand. She stubbornly spooned the sludge over milk anyway because she had already filmed the process. The first sip was like drinking a muddy puddle from a hiking trail. She learned the hard way that solubility isn't just a suggestion, it's a requirement for not chewing your morning beverage. 17. Mason thought slow cooker liners were a scam, so he improvised with a clean kitchen trash bag. He evidently forgot that garbage bags aren't food grade or heat resistant. 8 hours later, the plastic had fused to the ceramic crock, and the beef stew had distinct notes of scented polymer and cancer. The house smelled like a burning tire factory. He had to throw out the entire appliance, proving that being cheap is actually incredibly expensive when you factor in the cost of poisoning your dinner guests. 18. Trevor wanted a brick oven pizza effect for his lasagna, so he cranked the oven to self-clean, which hits about 900 degrees. The door automatically locked to protect humanity from his stupidity. He spent the next 3 hours watching his dinner turn into a cremation through the glass window. The apartment filled with smoke, and when the door finally unlocked, he pulled out a block of pure carbon. It wasn't dinner. It was a charcoal briquette that used to be pasta. The only thing he successfully baked was a lingering smell of failure. 19. Clint read a forum post about dishwasher salmon and decided his culinary genius needed a new medium. He wrapped the fillets in foil and placed them on the top rack, but purely out of muscle memory, he tossed in a platinum fresh detergent pod. The cycle finished, and the fish looked tender, but the flavor profile was distinctly low-tide laundry. He essentially steamed his dinner in chemical runoff. The dishwasher now smells like a fish market inside a soap factory, and Clint is eating granola bars while contemplating his life choices. 20. Rule number 1 of frying a turkey: make sure it's not frozen. Rule number 2, do it outside. Mike ignored both and attempted a quick-thaw deep fry inside his apartment. The moment the icy bird hit the boiling oil, physics took over. The pot erupted like Mount Vesuvius, sending a pillar of flame to the ceiling and triggering the fire sprinklers. His kitchen turned into a water park within seconds. The turkey was raw, the hallway was flooded, and his security deposit was gone forever. The family ate pizza while standing in ankle-deep water, discussing where Mike went wrong in life. 21. Gina wanted smoked salmon but didn't own a smoker, so she improvised with a stock pot and stick incense. She tented the fish over burning sandalwood, creating a culinary abomination. The salmon absorbed the distinct flavor of a college dorm room or a yoga studio. The texture was fine, but biting into it felt like licking a temple wall. She served it as Eastern fusion, and her guests chewed politely like hostages afraid to offend their captor. Even the cat sniffed it, gagged, and walked away to contact legal representation. 22. Margot saw a one-pan pasta recipe that promised no draining, but she interpreted that as no measuring. She guessed the water ratio, and it evaporated way too early. The noodles welded themselves to the pan, creating a solid block of starch, while the sauce condensed into a salty glue. She tried to scrape it off and serve it as pasta bark, but it was hard enough to chip a tooth. The dinner conversation revolved entirely around dental insurance. Lesson learned: chemistry doesn't care about your vibes. 23. Sasha forgot to thaw the fish and tried to speed-run the process by holding the fillets under hot tap water for 10 minutes. This resulted in a piece of fish that was cooked gray on the outside but remained a solid ice block in the center, essentially a fish popsicle wearing a warm sweater. She seared it anyway, hoping the pan would fix physics. It didn't. The texture was a confusing mix of mushy and frozen. She served it with extra tartar sauce and a tight smile, but everyone knew they were flirting with food poisoning. 24. Elise wanted to make cloud bread, but decided to improvise by adding extra yeast to self-rising flour. She essentially created a biological weapon. The dough inflated uncontrollably, rose up to kiss the heating element, and rained sticky, burning gluten stalactites onto the oven floor. She pulled out the cratered remains and called it rustic focaccia. The texture was like chewing on a hot memory foam pillow. It tasted like ambition mixed with ceiling paint. The guests ate it because they were scared of what she might bake next. 25. Marcus couldn't tell the difference between parsley and cilantro, so he used an entire bunch of cilantro in his salsa. To 15% of the population, cilantro tastes like soap due to genetics. Unfortunately, all his guests had that gene. The salsa tasted like he had grated a bar of Irish Spring directly into the tomatoes. He blamed the produce, then the store, before finally admitting his botanical illiteracy. The guests dipped their chips in silence, renaming the dish Pico de Sopo. Marcus is no longer allowed to buy green herbs without supervision. 26. Vanessa ran out of cornstarch for her sauce and, in a moment of desperation, decided to use laundry starch. Technically, they are both starches, but one is for collars and one is for eating. The sauce thickened beautifully, but tasted like a freshly pressed dress shirt. The shrimp scampi had a chemical stiffness and a baffling crunch that defied nature. She added garlic and butter to mask it, but you can't cover up the flavor of dry cleaning. On the bright side, the leftovers were completely wrinkle-resistant. 27. Holly tried to make a Japanese sponge cake in her rice cooker, but couldn't resist the urge to peek. Every time she lifted the lid, the steam escaped, and the cake collapsed a little more. By the end, the top looked like a deflated balloon or a Shar-Pei puppy. She unmolded a dense gummy disc, dusted it with powdered sugar to hide the shame, and called it cloud flan. The guests chewed bravely, but it had the texture of a rubber shoe sole. Patience is a virtue, Holly, and so is keeping the lid closed. 28. Wyatt ran out of ground coffee and decided to use his pepper mill to grind the beans. The grind was perfect, the crema was beautiful, and the aroma was inviting. But he forgot that he had used the mill for dried jalapenos the night before. The first sip was a violent assault of caffeine and capsaicin. It was a latte that fought back. He tried to rename it Spicy Morning Wake Up, but milk does nothing to soothe the burn of pepper-infused espresso. His throat was on fire until noon. 29. Aria thought reheating a bowl of grapes for a warm fruit salad sounded cozy and harmless. She didn't know that grapes, due to their shape and water content, create plasma when microwaved. 10 seconds in, tiny purple lightning bolts started arcing between the fruit like a science experiment gone wrong. The ozone smell filled the kitchen instantly. She yanked the door open, heart pounding, staring at her scorched bowl. Dessert was immediately switched to cold fruit. Physics class is now dismissed, Aria. 30. Brooke decided to dry age a steak at home using a mini fridge and a desk fan, bypassing all safety protocols. 2 weeks later, her apartment smelled like a blue cheese factory located inside a gym locker. The steak looked like a mummified leather wallet. She cooked it anyway, convinced the funk was gourmet. It tasted like rotting hazelnuts and regret. The texture was akin to chewing on a heritage leather belt. She ate 2 bites and spent the rest of the night with the windows open, questioning her life choices. 31. Keisha read that baking soda softens beans, but she interpreted a pinch as a handful. The beans turned to mush in 5 minutes and tasted distinctly of soapy shower tile. The texture was slimy, and the flavor was alkaline and metallic. She buried them under a mountain of salsa and smiled optimistically. The guests nodded politely, swallowed without chewing, and drank gallons of water to neutralize the pH in their stomachs. She now has a sticky note on her fridge that defines pinch as less than a shovel. 32. Paige saw a hack for hard-boiled eggs that involved microwaving them whole. She put 2 eggs in a bowl and hit start. One survived the timer, the other waited until she was peeling it to detonate. It exploded with the force of a grenade, spraying hot yolk all over the cabinets, the ceiling, and her bangs. She invented a new beauty product, omelet mist. Breakfast was downgraded to dry toast, while the kitchen smelled like sulfur and defeat. Efficiency isn't efficient if you have to clean egg off the ceiling. 33. Kyle confused a tablespoon with a teaspoon when adding ghost pepper powder to his chili. He essentially created a pot of edible pepper spray. One bite sent his guests sprinting for milk, yogurt, ice cubes, anything to stop the burning. One friend claimed his lips had physically left his body. The chili was reclassified as a chemical weapon and disposed of carefully. Kyle is now banned from handling spices hotter than paprika. 34. Cole put the turkey in the oven and roasted it to perfection, forgetting only one small detail: the plastic bag of giblets stuffed inside the cavity. When he went to carve the bird, he discovered a melted plastic geode fused to the rib cage. The gravy inside was a toxic soup of liver and polymer. The family stared at him like a jury delivering a guilty verdict. He aggressively plated the mashed potatoes and announced, "We are vegetarians tonight." The giblet bag is now a permanent reminder of his failure. 35. Robbie thought a power outage was the perfect excuse for a romantic, candle-lit dinner, so he placed taper candles directly above the stew pot for ambiance. He didn't notice the wax snowing into the broth until he served what he called a bougie glaze. The texture was confusing, silky at first, then suddenly chewy as the wax solidified on everyone's teeth. The flavor profile was savory thyme with distinct top notes of birthday candle and crayon. He tried to play it cool, but you can't really explain away a mouthful of paraffin. He eventually blew out the dessert candles and pivoted to serving crackers and humility in the dark. 36. Julian read "deglaze with red wine" and interpreted it as "empty the entire bottle into the skillet." The sauce didn't reduce. It turned into a purple swimming pool of tannins and regret. The steak boiled in the Cabernet Ocean, absorbing enough alcohol to require an ID check before eating. It tasted like a vineyard breakup, bitter, aggressive, and headache-inducing. He served it with a side of denial, but everyone at the table got tipsy just from the fumes. Pairing recommendation: a large glass of water and a designated driver. 37. Derek wanted that competition-level barbecue depth without owning a smoker, so he marinated his ribs in straight liquid smoke for 24 hours. He ignored the label that screamed "concentrate." When he opened the oven, it released a dense fog of campfire and ashtray that permeated the drywall. Neighbors texted asking if he was burning old tires. The meat tasted like he was chewing on a haunted chimney or a charred piece of driftwood. The barbecue sauce tried to perform CPR on the flavor, but the house smell is now a permanent resident. 38. Lola decided to make her late-night focaccia goth by stirring in a generous amount of activated charcoal for moody crumbs. The dough turned raven black, which looked cool on Instagram but terrifying in real life. The baked loaf dyed every smile, tongue, and tooth a deep void-like black. Hands, cutting boards, and napkins looked like they had been through a coal mine. The flavor was solid, but the optics were chaotic. Guests posed for edgy photos, then immediately ran to the bathroom for water and a mirror, praying the stain wasn't permanent. 39. Milo decided to tackle homemade croissants but ignored the one rule of pastry: keep it cold. He tried to laminate the dough with warm slabs of butter in a humid kitchen. The dough exhaled, the layers collapsed, and the butter fled the pastry like it was escaping a bank heist. The oven produced flat, shiny biscuits of heartbreak instead of flaky crescents. He ate 3 of the greasy discs in silence, vowed revenge on the French culinary arts, and bought a digital probe thermometer like it was a lightsaber to fight the heat next time. 40. Clara thought making overnight oatmeal in her rice cooker would be efficient, but she accidentally hit cook instead of keep warm before going to bed. At 3 a.m., a beige volcano of porridge erupted, creeping over the counter and dripping onto the floor. Tiny rivers of oats hardened into cement, and the cat walked through the mess, leaving fossilized footprints in the breakfast. The oatmeal tasted like guilt and cat hair. Her review of the recipe: hearty, filling, and emotionally heavy. Cleaning dried oatmeal out of a rice cooker vent is a punishment reserved for the wicked. 41. Jenna was following a recipe on her phone and decided to balance it on the rim of the pot for a hands-free experience. One enthusiastic stir later, her elbow bumped fate, and the phone cannonballed into the chili. It sank beneath the surface and went silent like a submarine lost at sea. She fished it out with tongs, dripping in marinara red and beans. Siri gurgled a confused, "Sorry?" before the screen went black forever. Dinner was served with a side of rice and absolutely no conversation, as everyone stared at the bag of rice drying out the device. 42. Karen preheated the oven for a frozen pizza, but left the pizza, still in its cardboard box, inside to keep the heat in, while the oven warmed up. 10 minutes later, the kitchen was filled with the artisanal incense of burning ink, glue, and shame. The cardboard fused to the oven rack, creating a piece of modern art titled Regret. She tried to scrape it off, but the box had become one with the metal. She served the pizza with a smoky aftertaste and called it rustic. The building superintendent has scheduled a performance review for her judgment. 43. Tessa assumed wax paper and parchment paper were basically the same thing because they look identical. They are not. Parchment paper is heat-resistant. Wax paper is wax. The moment the tray hit the heat, the wax melted and the paper smoked, shrinking into a glossy, perfumed flag of surrender. The cookies were encased in a layer of paraffin. She lifted the tray of caramelized origami and joked, "We reinvented peanut brittle." The smoke alarm clapped in approval, but the dog took one sniff and left the room. 44. Corey saw a healthy dessert hack involving frozen grapes dipped in caramel. He skipped the part about drying the grapes first. When he dipped the wet, frozen fruit into the boiling hot sugar, the water flashed to steam instantly. The caramel exploded, turning each grape into a tiny, sugary grenade. Molten sugar splattered the cabinets, the walls, and his forehead. The survivors tasted amazing, sweet and crunchy, but the danger level was high. He plated them with an ice pack centerpiece for his burns. 45. Bianca felt that artificial food coloring was unhealthy, so she juiced fresh beets to make a natural red velvet cake. The batter turned a vibrant magenta, which was beautiful until she touched it. Her hands looked like she had just solved a murder mystery, and the countertop signed a long-term lease with the pink stain. The cake tasted fine, earthy even, but every slice stained the plates and the guests' souls. Everyone left the party with pink fingerprints, looking like they had just robbed a strawberry bank. 46. Ethan decided to swap almond flour 1-for-1 in his chocolate chip cookies, ignoring the fact that almond flour has no gluten structure. The trays went in looking like dough balls and came out as one giant buttery puddle with floating chocolate islands. The cookies had spread into a single flat sheet of lace. He cut them into toffee shards and declared it cookie bark. They tasted great, but the parchment paper held exclusive custody of the crumbs. Gluten waved from a distance, whispering, "You miss me now, don't you?" 47. Faith made Caesar dressing from scratch but couldn't find anchovies, so she grabbed a bottle of anchovy essence she found in the pantry. It turned out to be scented oil for a candle, not food. The salad glistened beautifully, but the aroma was hauntingly artificial. The croutons tried to soak up the mistake, but nothing could save it. She apologized to the city of Rome and threw the entire bowl away. New rule: non-edible oils are banned from the kitchen shelves. The romaine lettuce has filed for witness protection. 48. Amber ran out of counter space during prep, so she placed her heavy-tempered glass cutting board over a cold electric burner. It worked great until she accidentally bumped the dial to high. 5 minutes later, the kitchen sounded like a shotgun went off as the board exploded from thermal shock. A million tiny diamonds of hot glass garnished the mashed potatoes and the floor. Dinner was immediately canceled because razor-sharp confetti isn't a food group. The cleanup took 3 days, and she still finds glass in her socks. 49. Rosa was making caramel, and it looked silky and perfect until she added cold heavy cream straight from the fridge. The thermal shock caused the pot to seize instantly, turning the sugar into a rock-hard block of concrete. The spoon was imprisoned in the candy at a dramatic 45-degree angle, unable to move. She tried to reheat it, begged it to melt, and finally surrendered. Dessert pivoted to fresh berries served with industrial praline shards. Her dentist texted a thumbs up, but the saucepan filed for early retirement. All right, confess. Which one would you secretly do when nobody's watching? Comment your most unforgivable kitchen habit, and if you lie, I hope your next sauce seizes into concrete with the spoon trapped in it forever. Hit like if at least one of these hurt your soul and subscribe, because the US will keep feeding us new disasters.